The corporate cafeteria was supposed to be anonymous, a place of steam tables and soft murmurs, not life-altering revelations. But for single dad and line cook Michael Vale, a simple bowl of soup, his grandmother's recipe, delivered to a sick elderly woman in the executive guest suite, was about to shatter that anonymity. When the CEO found her mother in tears, not of sickness, but of memory, one question would unravel a decade-old sacrifice and offer a man who gave up his dream a chance to finally grasp it. Michael Vale, a 34-year-old single father, had perfected the art of being invisible in the sprawling headquarters of Sterling Tech. For 2 years, his world was the steam and clatter of the staff cafeteria, a relentless cycle of prep and cleanup, all to provide for his daughter, Chloe. But that simple act of kindness, delivering a forgotten meal, was about to collide with a past he had buried. The soup was just his grandmother's recipe. The memory it triggered, however, would force the company's powerful CEO to ask a question with the power to rewrite a life. What dream did you sacrifice, and why? His day began in the dark, at 4:45 a.m., a full hour before the first executive would even think about their morning espresso. Michael Vale's first shift was about silence and preparation, firing up the industrial griddles, proofing the dough for hundreds of pastries, and starting the massive stockpot that would become the day's soups. He worked with a quiet, rhythmic efficiency, a man who had turned necessity into a kind of meditation. The cafeteria uniform, a stiff white polo and apron, was a costume he wore without complaint. It paid the rent on their small, second-floor apartment. It paid for Chloe's after-school program, her dinosaur books, her light-up sneakers. She was 6 years old, with her mother's wide, curious eyes and a laugh that could dismantle the worst of his fatigue. Her mother, Sarah, had left 3 years ago, not with drama, but with a quiet, final exhaustion, the city, the struggle, the relentless pressure of a life built on shifting sand. She'd kissed Chloe goodbye and taken a bus back to her hometown in Ohio. The divorce papers arrived 6 months later. Michael never fought them. He just added single father to the list of titles he carried: line cook, prep chef, dishwasher, janitor. The dream felt like something that had happened to another person. A lifetime ago, at 19, Michael had been accepted to the Culinary Institute of America. The acceptance letter, now faded and tucked into a childhood photo album at the bottom of his closet, had been his ticket out of a Rust Belt town where the factories had closed and hope was a seasonal thing. He'd gotten a partial scholarship. His grandmother, Ida, had sewn $500 into the lining of his best jacket. "For your first good knife," she'd whispered, her hands, gnarled from a lifetime at her own stove, squeezing his. But then his father had the heart attack. The medical bills were a bottomless pit. The partial scholarship couldn't cover living costs, and the student loans he qualified for felt like signing a future he didn't have. He'd called the admissions office, his throat tight, and declined. He took a job at a chain restaurant off the interstate instead, sending money home every week. The dream didn't shatter. It just got packed away carefully, like his grandmother's good china, on a shelf too high to reach. A decade of anonymous kitchens followed. Then Chloe was born, and the calculus of his life narrowed beautifully, terribly, to one immutable equation: her safety, her happiness. The job at Sterling Tech's corporate cafeteria 2 years ago was a minor miracle. Steady hours, health benefits, a building so sleek and secure it felt like a different planet. He was a ghost in the machine of innovation, feeding the minds that designed the future while his own past gathered dust. The request came in at 2:17 p.m. on a rainy Thursday. A note from executive administration: a guest in the Panorama Suite on the 22nd floor had missed the lunch delivery. Could the kitchen send up something simple, brothy, easy on the stomach? The regular runner was out sick. Michael, between lunch service breakdown and dinner prep, volunteered. He packed a tray himself: a bowl of the day's chicken and orzo soup, some dry toast, a pot of tea. It was his grandmother's recipe, the one she called "get well soup," with a squeeze of lemon and dill from the tiny herb plant he kept on the cafeteria's windowsill. He rode the service elevator up, the sterile quiet of the executive floors a stark contrast to the steamy chaos below. Elena Sterling, the CEO's mother, was a small woman swallowed by a large armchair, a cashmere blanket around her shoulders. She was recovering from a bad flu, her face pale. She thanked him with a frail voice. Michael set the tray on the table beside her, described what was there, and turned to leave. but the aroma from the bowl, the lemon, the dill, the rich chicken broth seemed to hang in the air. He was at the door when he heard the first soft, choked sob. He turned back. Elena Sterling was not eating. She was holding the spoon, trembling, tears streaming down her face in silent, relentless tracks. "I'm so sorry," Michael said, stepping forward, thinking he'd done something wrong. Is it not to your liking?" She looked up at him, her eyes glassy with memory. No, young man, it's perfect." Her voice was a whisper scraped raw by emotion. "It tastes like home. It tastes exactly like the soup my mother made for me when I was a little girl, sick in bed. I haven't tasted this. I haven't felt this in 70 years." She took a shuddering breath, a dam of nostalgia breaking open. How do you know this?" Michael stood frozen, the humble cafeteria worker in the multimillion-dollar suite, watching this elegant woman weep over a $5 bowl of soup. "It's my grandmother's recipe, ma'am, Ida's get-well soup." He offered a small, hesitant smile. "It's the only thing that ever worked for me, too." That was the scene Evelyn Sterling walked in on 5 minutes later. The CEO, a woman known in tech journals for her razor-sharp logic and ruthless efficiency, paused in the doorway. She saw her mother, emotionally overcome, holding the hand of a man in a cafeteria uniform. She saw the half-finished bowl of soup. Her analytical mind, trained to assess patterns and anomalies, immediately understood this was not a normal service interaction. "Mother," she said, her voice cutting the quiet. Elena looked up, her face softening. "Evelyn, dear, come taste this. This young man has performed a miracle." Evelyn approached, her eyes not on the soup, but on Michael. He was looking at the floor, the very picture of someone wishing it would swallow him whole. "You made this?" she asked, her tone not unkind, but probing. "Yes, ma'am, from the cafeteria kitchen." She dipped a clean spoon into the broth, tasted it. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes did. It was a subtle shift, the recognition of something that transcended mere cafeteria fare. This was food with a history, with emotional weight. In a company built on lines of code, it was a tangible, human algorithm of care. "What's your name?" she asked. "Michael Vale, ma'am." "And you're a cook here?" "A cafeteria worker, ma'am, yes." She nodded slowly, her gaze still fixed on him. "Thank you, Michael, for taking care of my mother." He gave a quick nod and practically fled, the service elevator doors closing on the silent, charged room he left behind. Evelyn Sterling did not become CEO by letting anomalies go uninvestigated. After settling her mother for a nap, she returned to her office and did what she did best. She sourced data, a query to human resources. Michael Vale's file was thin. Employment history, various diners and mid-tier restaurants. Education, high school diploma. Emergency contact, his daughter, Chloe Vale. But there was a note, a comment from the cafeteria manager on his annual review. "Exceptionally skilled with soups and sauces. Has an instinct for flavor the other line cooks don't. Wastes less food than anyone. Could run this kitchen if he had the paperwork." The paperwork. Evelyn leaned back in her chair. She pulled up the corporate directory and found the internal number for the cafeteria manager, a man named Leo. She called him directly. "Leo, Evelyn Sterling, I have a question about one of your employees, Michael Vale." On the other end, Leo sighed, a sound of genuine regret. "Oh, Mikey, yeah, good kid, heart of gold, works harder than any two people. It's a damn shame, really." "A shame," Evelyn prompted. "The talent that guy has, it's not for a corporate cafeteria line. You can taste it. He did a staff meal for us once, just playing around, a braised short rib, a red wine reduction. I'm telling you, it was restaurant quality. Michelin adjacent. I asked him about it. He got real quiet, said he'd had a shot a long time ago, but life got in the way. I did some digging." One of the guys who used to work with him at the Oak Grill said Mikey talks in his sleep about some fancy culinary school he almost went to. Said he turned it down for family, got the acceptance and everything. Evelyn Sterling ended the call and sat in the gathering dusk of her office, the city lights blinking on below. A man with hidden talent, working a job beneath his skill for a reason tied to family. A man whose simple, heartfelt cooking could unlock a 70-year-old memory in her mother. The patterns were connecting, forming a picture that was both a tragedy and a potential opportunity. She opened a new browser window. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then she typed a name into the search bar, her decision solidifying with each click. The first major turning point was here, and it began not with a business proposition, but with a search for a ghost from a sacrificed past. She typed, Culinary Institute of America, Admissions Records, 2014. The admissions office at the Culinary Institute of America is not in the habit of fielding calls from tech CEOs about decade-old applicant files, but Evelyn Sterling was persuasive, and her executive assistant was persistent. Within 48 hours, a scanned PDF landed in Evelyn's inbox. It was the application and acceptance letter for Michael James Vale for the fall 2014 class. The letter was real. It was the accompanying essay, required for the scholarship he'd been offered, that made Evelyn's breath catch. In careful 19-year-old handwriting, he had written about his grandmother Ida's kitchen, the alchemy of her soup, the way she could make a handful of beans and a ham bone taste like abundance. He wrote about food as a language of care, a tangible love. He wrote, I don't just want to cook. I want to make people feel the way my grandmother made me feel, seen and nourished and home. The file was stamped in red. Application withdrawn BY applicant, August 3, 2014. Evelyn stared at the date. She cross-referenced it with the sparse details in his HR file. His father's medical emergency would have been that same summer. The pieces locked together with a quiet, devastating click. He hadn't failed. He had chosen. He had traded his own future for a family obligation. Meanwhile, Michael's life continued its unbroken rhythm. The incident in the Panorama Suite was a strange, bright blip he tried to forget. He was just the guy who brought the soup. He assumed the CEO had already dismissed it. But then, 3 days after the soup delivery, his cafeteria manager, Leo, pulled him aside during the post-lunch lull. Leo's expression was unreadable, a mix of nerves and awe. Mikey, my office, now. In the cramped, windowless office that smelled of old coffee and grease, Leo didn't sit. The big boss, Evelyn Sterling, she wants to see you in her office at 4 p.m. today. Michael felt the floor tilt. Why did I do something wrong with her mother? She didn't say, she just said to send you up. And Mikey, she didn't sound angry. She sounded like she does when she's about to acquire a company, interested. The next 4 hours were a slow-motion panic attack. Every catastrophic scenario played in his head. He was being fired for overstepping. The soup had made the CEO's mother sicker. They'd found some violation. He mentally calculated his savings, barely 2 months of rent, and felt sick. He called his brother to make sure he could pick Chloe up from after-school care just in case. Just in case of what? His brother asked. I don't know, Michael said, his voice tight. Just in case. At 3:55, he stood outside the double oak doors of the CEO's suite on the top floor, having traded his apron for a clean polo. His palms were damp. The executive assistant, a poised woman with a kind smile, nodded him in. Evelyn Sterling's office was not what he expected. It was spacious, with a breathtaking view of the city, but it was not cold. Books lined one wall. A framed photograph of her and her mother, both laughing, sat on the desk. Evelyn herself was standing by the window, but she turned as he entered. Michael, thank you for coming. Please sit. He sat on the edge of a sleek but surprisingly comfortable chair. She didn't return to her desk. Instead, she sat in the chair opposite him, removing the barrier. It was a disarming move. First, she began, her voice measured, I want to thank you again for your kindness to my mother. That soup, it meant a great deal to her. It sparked a memory we've been talking about for days. It was just soup, ma'am, Michael said, the words automatic. No, Evelyn said, shaking her head slowly. It was, and that's why I asked you here. She leaned forward slightly. I took the liberty of doing some research. I hope you'll forgive the intrusion. She reached for a tablet on the coffee table between them. With a tap, the scanned image of his old essay appeared on the screen, his teenage handwriting unmistakable. Michael's blood turned to ice. He stared at the screen, then at her, his face a mask of shock and vulnerability. The sight of that essay, in this context, felt like a physical violation. How did you get that? The Culinary Institute was very helpful, she said, her tone leaving no room for questions about how she'd managed that. You were accepted. You were offered a scholarship. You wrote this. She tapped the line about his grandmother. And then, in August of 2014, you withdrew. The same summer your father had a major health crisis. The room was silent, except for the low hum of the building's climate control. Michael felt exposed, flayed open. The carefully constructed wall between his present and his past had been obliterated with a few keystrokes. That was a long time ago, he finally managed, his voice rough. It was, Evelyn agreed, but the man who wrote this essay isn't gone. I tasted his work in that soup. My manager, Leo, sings praises about your instinct that he can't teach. You have a talent, Michael, a rare one, and you're working a job that doesn't require it. She set the tablet down. I want to know why you're here, in my cafeteria, and not in a kitchen of your own. The directness of the question was a shock. For years, the answer had been a simple, unspoken mantra for Chloe Asterisk, but saying it out loud to this powerful woman felt both too simple and too complex. My daughter, he said, the words sticking in his throat. I have a daughter, she's 6. This job, it's stable, it has benefits, it lets me be there for her. Culinary school was a dream for a kid with no responsibilities. Life happened. Evelyn listened, her gaze steady. So you gave it up, for your father then, for your daughter now. It wasn't a sacrifice, Michael said, a defensive edge creeping in. It was a choice, one I'd make again. I believe you, Evelyn said, and she sounded like she meant it. But what if you didn't have to choose? What if you could provide stability for your daughter Asterisk and honor that 19-year-old who wrote about food as a language of love? Michael frowned, confused. I don't understand. Evelyn Sterling stood up and walked to her desk, retrieving a folder. Sterling Tech is launching a new flagship project, a hospitality and experiential division. At its heart will be a restaurant, not a corporate cafeteria, but a true dining destination, showcasing sustainable tech in the kitchen and exceptional food. We have the location, we have the funding. What we don't have yet is a chef with a vision. She placed the folder on the coffee table in front of him. I am offering you the position of executive chef. To design the menu, build the kitchen team, and create the culinary identity of this venture from the ground up. The words hung in the air, meaningless at first, then coalescing into an impossible sentence. Michael stared at the closed folder as if it might contain a live wire. He couldn't even form a thought. It was ludicrous, a joke, a test. You're offering me a job as a chef. I don't have the credentials. I've never run a kitchen. I'm a line cook. You have the palate, Evelyn countered. You have the instinct. You have the story. And you have a work ethic my HR file confirms is unassailable. Credentials can be supplemented with experience. I'm not looking for a celebrity chef with a TV show. I'm looking for someone who understands that food, at its best, is an emotional technology. You demonstrated that to my mother. That's a credential no diploma can match. Michael's mind reeled. The salary she named next was a number that made his ears ring, triple his current pay, with equity and a benefits package that included full family medical and a tuition assistance program. It was a life raft thrown into the middle of his ocean of quiet struggle, but it was also a cliff. I wouldn't know where to start. The people, the pressure, I'd be setting myself up to fail, and if I fail, I lose everything. My current job, my stability for Chloe. Evelyn nodded, acknowledging the fear. That's a real risk, which is why the offer isn't just a job offer, it's a proposal. You would start as a consultant, with a 6-month retainer that guarantees your current salary regardless of outcome. During that time, you'll work with a mentor, a retired Michelin-starred chef I've already contacted who is willing to advise. You'll take intensive management courses. You'll build your menu. If at the end of 6 months, you don't want to continue, or we jointly decide it's not the right fit, you can return to the cafeteria with no penalty and a significant bonus for your time. But if you succeed, you step into the role permanently. It was an offer designed to dismantle every rational fear. It was too good, too carefully constructed. The skeptic in him, forged by years of hardship, reared up. Why would you do this? For me, because I made your mother cry. Evelyn's expression softened just a fraction, because my mother's tears were data. They were proof of concept. In a world saturated with empty innovation, you made something that created a genuine human connection. That is the most valuable commodity there is. I'm not doing this for you, Michael. I'm doing it for my company. I believe you can help us build something unique. And, she added, her voice dropping, because I've made it my business to recognize wasted potential. I see it in startups We pass on every day. I don't want to be the person who passes on this. She pushed the folder closer to him. Take this home, read it, talk to your daughter. Don't give me an answer now, but know this is a real offer. Michael took the folder, his hands trembling slightly. The weight of it, of the possible future it contained, was immense. He walked out of the office in a daze, the folder pressed to his chest like a secret. He didn't go back to the cafeteria. He went straight to the parking garage, got into his agging sedan, and just sat there, staring at the pristine Sterling Tech logo on the folder. That night after Chloe was asleep, he opened it. The offer letter was real. The salary figures were real. The mentor named was a chef whose cookbook he owned. The timeline, the safety nets, all real. He looked around his modest, threadbare living room at Chloe's drawings taped to the fridge. This offer was a portal to another life, one where he didn't have to worry about the car breaking down, where he could buy Chloe the fancy science kit she'd eyed in the museum store, where he could finally use the hands that had learned to chop and season for a purpose beyond mere sustenance. But the fear was a physical presence, a cold knot in his stomach. He saw the judgmental faces of trained chefs. He heard the whispers, cafeteria worker, charity case, CEO's pet project asterisk. He imagined failing spectacularly, publicly, and having to slink back to the steam table, the object of pity. He thought of the long hours a startup restaurant would demand, hours away from Chloe. Was this just trading one sacrifice for another? He didn't sleep. The next morning, over cereal, Chloe looked at him with her clear eyes. "Daddy, you look tired. Did you have bad dreams?" "No, sweetie," he said, forcing a smile. "Daddy just has a big decision to make." "Is it a good decision or a scary decision?" "Both," he said, and it was the truest thing he'd said all week. The news, of course, did not stay contained. In a corporation of thousands, a cafeteria worker being summoned to the C-suite was a seismic event. Whispers snaked through the kitchen by the next afternoon. Leo tried to shut them down, but it was too late. The rumor morphed and grew. Michael was being promoted to manage the cafeteria. Michael was being fired for fraternizing with an executive's family. Michael had saved the CEO's mother from choking. Then, a week after the meeting, a different kind of tension arrived. A man in an impeccably tailored suit walked into the cafeteria during the slow mid-afternoon period. He didn't get in line. He walked straight to the kitchen pass-through and asked for Michael by name. He introduced himself as Martin Thorne, the director of the new hospitality division. He was there, he said, to give Michael a tour of the raw, unfinished space that was to become the restaurant. It was a power move, forcing Michael out of the safety of his kitchen and into the concrete and dust reality of the offer. Reluctantly, Michael followed him across the skybridge to an adjacent building Sterling Tech had recently acquired. The space was a vast, empty shell on the ground floor, all exposed concrete and dangling wires. But the potential was visible: floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of a public park, the skeleton of what could be a stunning open kitchen. "This will be your canvas," Thorne said, his voice echoing in the emptiness. He was enthusiastic, but his eyes held a sharp, assessing glint. He was a corporate man, and Michael could sense his skepticism. To Thorne, Michael wasn't a discovered genius. He was an unproven variable in a multi-million-dollar equation. As Thorne talked about construction timelines and investor presentations, Michael's anxiety spiked. This was real. These people were serious, and they were watching him. He was no longer just a cook. He was a project. The weight of their expectations settled on him like a second skin. The breaking point came 2 days later. He was prepping vegetables, trying to lose himself in the rhythmic chop of carrots, when two sous chefs from the executive dining room, a separate, fancy kitchen that served the top brass, stopped by the cafeteria line. They were known for their arrogance. "Hey Vale," one called out, a smirk playing on his lips. "Heard you're trading in your hairnet for a toque blanche. Congrats. Guess it pays to have the boss's mom as a taste tester." The other chef chuckled. "Yeah, let us know when you need lessons on how to properly dice an onion. We know cafeteria style is a little rough." The laughter was sharp, meant to wound. It echoed the very fears screaming in his own head. He said nothing, just kept chopping, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. The offer folder at home now felt like a target on his back. He was caught between two worlds, accepted by neither. The safety of his old life was vanishing, poisoned by resentment and rumor, while the new life offered a terrifying leap into a void of judgment and potential failure. The bridge was burning behind him, and the path ahead was shrouded in fog. He had to make a choice, and soon, but every possible direction seemed to lead to a different kind of ruin. The laughter of the sous chefs was the final crack in the dam, but the flood that followed came from a completely different direction. It was his daughter, Chloe, who forced the decision. She came home from school the next day quiet, which was unusual. Over a dinner of spaghetti, she finally spoke. "Jenna's mom said my dad is getting a fancy new job because you made a lady cry. Is that true?" Michael's fork froze halfway to his mouth. The rumors had leaked out of the corporate tower and into the second-grade classroom. "It's a little more complicated than that, Bug." "Is it a good job?" she asked, her eyes serious. "It could be, but it would mean I'd be very busy for a while. Less time for bedtime stories some nights." Chloe thought about this, twirling spaghetti around her fork. "But would you be happy doing it? Like really happy? You're not happy when you come home from the cafeteria. You're just tired." The simplicity of her observation was a knife to the heart. He had thought he was hiding his quiet desperation, his simmering regret. But children are seismographs for emotional truth. She felt the low-frequency hum of his unhappiness through the floorboards of their life. He looked at her, this small, perceptive human who was his entire world, and realized a terrifying truth. By choosing the safe, miserable path, he wasn't just sacrificing his own dream. He was modeling a life of resigned disappointment for her. What dream would she feel she had to abandon one day, believing that's just what you do? That night after she was asleep, he signed the offer letter. The fear was still there, a cold stone in his gut, but it was now outweighed by a fiercer, more primal motivation. He did not want his daughter to see him as a man who was afraid to try. The corporate machinery engaged with silent, efficient force. His retainer period began. He was given an official title, Culinary Concept Developer. He kept his cafeteria shifts, but 3 days a week, he now reported to the raw restaurant space or to conference room for management training. His mentor, the retired Michelin-starred chef, was a man named Arnaud Deschamps. He was in his 70s, with hands like weathered map and eyes that missed nothing. Their first meeting was not in a kitchen, but in a park. Arnaud had brought a basket of different tomatoes, heirloom varieties, beefsteaks, cherries. "Tell me about them," Arnaud said, his voice a gravelly murmur. "Not with your eyes, with your hands, your nose, then your tongue." For an hour, Michael felt, smelled, and tasted, describing the differences in texture, acidity, sweetness, and the vague sense of sunshine or earth each carried. Arnaud listened, nodding slowly. "Good, you are not looking for the right answer. You are listening to the ingredient. This is the only skill that matters. Everything else, the knife cuts, the sauces, is just grammar. You must first have poetry." It was the first validation that didn't feel like charity. But the corporate side was a minefield. Martin Thorne, the division director, scheduled a vision alignment meeting. In a sleek conference room with a dozen suited executives and marketing people, Michael was asked to present his initial menu concepts. He had spent nights sketching ideas, pairing flavors inspired by his grandmother's cooking with modern techniques. He talked about a deconstructed chicken soup, where the essence of the broth was captured in a gelée, with crispy skin and delicate herb foam. He described a short rib braised with coffee and spices, a nod to the pot roasts of his childhood. The room was silent. Then Martin Thorne cleared his throat. "Interesting, very homespun, but we need to think about brand alignment. The Sterling table needs to signal asterisk future forward, molecular gastronomy, lab-grown protein showcases. I was thinking more along the lines of an algorithmically optimized tasting menu where each bite is determined by the guest's biometric feedback from a wearable device." Michael stared at him. "You want the food to be decided by a computer." "We're a tech company," Thorne said, smiling tightly. "The story is the tech, the food is the medium." It was a direct assault on everything Michael believed food should be: human, emotional, imperfect. Arnaud, who had insisted on sitting in, spoke for the first time, his voice cutting through the air like a cleaver. "Nonsense. The story is the taste. The story is the memory. The technology should be the silent servant in the kitchen, not the shouting idiot at the table." The room went very still. The clash of philosophies was now out in the open, a battle for the soul of the restaurant before it even had a name. Evelyn Sterling, wisely, did not take sides in the meeting, but she summoned Michael to her office afterward. "Thorne is worried about investor perception," she said. "He thinks your narrative is soft." "And what do you think?" Michael asked, emboldened by Arnaud's support and his own rising conviction. "I think soft is what cut through the noise and reached my mother. I hired you for your voice. Don't let them edit it into silence." But she held up a finger. "You have to prove the voice can carry a business. Your first major test is in 4 weeks. We're hosting a preview dinner for 30 key investors and media influencers. You will design and execute the menu. Arnaud will be your guide, but you will be the captain. This is your chance to shut Thorne up with a fork and a spoon." The pressure was now astronomical. He had to create a stunning meal that would appease corporate sensibilities while staying true to his own culinary heart, all while learning to manage a kitchen team he hadn't even hired yet. He worked 18-hour days. He'd leave at dawn for the cafeteria, spend his afternoon in the unfinished restaurant space with contractors and equipment vendors, then work late into the night on recipe testing in a rented commercial kitchen space Arnaud had secured. Chloe stayed with his brother more often. The guilt was a constant ache, but he clung to the hope that this was temporary, that he was building a better future for her. Then the first major crisis hit. A week before the preview dinner, his lead vendor for sustainably sourced poultry backed out. Then 2 of the kitchen staff he'd tentatively hired, experienced cooks who were skeptical of his background, caught wind of the internal conflict with Thorne and resigned. "We don't want to be part of a ship that's already fighting itself," one told him bluntly. Michael was in the empty restaurant space, staring at a stack of resignations, feeling the walls close in. He called Arnaud, his voice thick with panic. "It's falling apart. I can't do this." Arnaud's response was characteristically brusque. "Good, now you have nothing to lose. Stop trying to hire experienced cooks who look down on you. Hire hungry ones, kids from culinary school who want a shot, people from community kitchens who have passion but no pedigree. And for the chicken, your grandmother's soup did not need a sustainable pedigree. It needed care. Find another chicken. Make it taste like that." It was a radical pivot. Scrapping the conventional hiring path, Michael and Leo put out calls to local culinary programs and immigrant community centers. He assembled a ragtag team, a recent grad named Sophia who was fiercely talented but had been turned down everywhere for lack of experience, a former line cook from a closed Filipino bakery named Marco, a quiet, older woman named Greta who had cooked in German restaurants for decades but had never been given creative control. They were outsiders, all of them, and they rallied to him precisely because he was one too. In them, he saw reflected his own years of overlooked potential. The dynamic shifted from suspicion to a desperate, united camaraderie. They worked together in the rented kitchen, testing and arguing and laughing. Michael discovered a new talent, not just cooking, but listening, synthesizing their ideas. Sophia's modern plating sensibilities balanced Greta's deep knowledge of foundational sources. Marco introduced a calamansi vinegar that brightened a dish in a way lemon never could. 3 days before the dinner, with a new poultry supplier secured and a menu finally locked, the second, more devastating blow landed. It came in the form of a sleek industry blog headline that popped up on Martin Thorne's screen and was immediately forwarded to the entire executive team. "Sterling Tech Kitchen Experiment, Charity Case or Calculated Risk." The article was brutal. It had details only someone inside the project could know: the internal conflict with Thorne, the resignations, the scrabbling for vendors. It painted Michael as a well-meaning cafeteria worker and Evelyn's project as a potentially embarrassing dalliance with sentiment over substance. The anonymous source, quoted throughout, was clearly from Thorne's camp. The article went viral in their insular world. Investor emails started pinging with concern. Evelyn's board demanded a call. Michael read it in the cafeteria break room, his hands turning numb. This wasn't just failure. This was public, humiliating evisceration before he'd even served a single plate. The safe harbor of returning to the cafeteria was now gone too. That life had been permanently altered by the spotlight of this disaster. Evelyn summoned him and Thorne to her office. Her face was a mask of controlled fury. "One of you," she said, her voice dangerously quiet, is trying to sink this project before it sails to prove a point. I don't care who. What I care about is that in 72 hours, 30 of the most critical people in our ecosystem will be sitting down to eat. The narrative is no longer in our control. It's in the hands of the food. So here is what is going to happen. She turned her gaze to Michael. You will cook the meal you and your team have planned. You will not play it safe. You will execute your vision boldly. Then she turned to Thorn. And you will be in that dining room, smiling, selling the vision of human-centric innovation like your career depends on it. Because from where I'm sitting, it does. It was the ultimate pressure cooker. The bridge was not just burned, it had been blown up and the wreckage published in a blog. There was no way back. There was only through. The night before the preview dinner, Michael didn't sleep. He stood in the now furnished, elegant dining room, the tables set with impeccable china under soft light. This was it. Not a test of skill alone, but a test of belief in himself, in his team, in the simple, terrifying idea that a memory of taste could be powerful enough to build a future on. Tomorrow, he would either validate every doubter or he would change the entire story with the first course served. The clock was ticking down to 0. The kitchen on the night of the preview dinner was a cathedral of concentrated silence, a stark contrast to the murmur of 30 guests in the adjacent dining room. Michael stood at the pass, the nerve center, dressed in a chef's jacket for the first time. It felt alien, like a costume. But when he looked at his team, Sophia with her meticulous plating focus, Marco with his calm efficiency at the stove, Goethe checking her sauces with a critical eye, the costume began to feel like a uniform. Theirs. Arnaud stood slightly behind him, a silent sentinel. He had given only one piece of advice before service: cook for the woman who cried. If you reach one person that way, you have won. The first course was the one that had started it all, reimagined: essence of Ida's soup, a clear golden chicken consommé shimmering in a delicate cup, with a single perfect raviolo floating at its center. The pasta, thin as a breath, contained a filling of finely shredded chicken and lemon zest. On the side, a tiny bundle of fresh dill. The instruction was to sip the broth, then break the raviolo. It was a gamble, starting with soup with memory instead of something flashy. Michael watched through the kitchen door as the bowls were set down. He saw the skeptical glances of investors who had read the blog. He saw Martin Thorne's fixed, tense smile. Then he saw Alina Sterling, Evelyn's mother, seated at the center table as the guest of honor. She lifted the cup, sipped, and closed her eyes. A slow, recognizable smile spread across her face. She leaned over and whispered something to her daughter. Evelyn's shoulders, which had been held in a rigid line, dropped a fraction of an inch. At another table, a notoriously hard-to-please tech blogger took a spoonful, paused, and took another, looking thoughtfully at the bowl. The silence from the dining room was not disappointment. It was the silence of 30 people actually tasting. The first wave of plates returned to the kitchen, nearly every bowl empty. No one on the line celebrated. They just took a collective breath. The first gate had been passed. Course by course, the story unfolded on the plates. The coffee-spiced short rib, so tender it yielded to a fork, atop a parsnip puree with a crisp onion jam. A roasted heritage chicken breast with skin, so crackling perfect it sounded like autumn leaves underfoot, accompanied by a barley risotto with wild mushrooms. Each dish was technically precise, but the soul was unmistakable: comfort food elevated, memory made tangible. Sophia's artistic plating made it beautiful. Marco's instinct for balance made it sing. Greta's steadfastness on fundamentals made it solid. Halfway through, a server rushed back with a note from a guest at table 3. Michael's heart sank. A complaint, an allergy. He unfolded the small card. In elegant handwriting it read, "The short rib, my father was from Texas. He made something like this once before he died. Thank you for the memory, Catherine Vance." Catherine Vance was the editor of the city's most influential lifestyle magazine. She was not just a guest, she was a gatekeeper. She wasn't just impressed, she was moved. The final dessert was Arnaud's suggestion: a warm apple tart tatin with a salted caramel glaze and a rosemary-infused creme fraiche. It was simple, classic, and when the scent of brown butter and apples hit the dining room, a literal, audible sigh rippled through the space. As the last plates were cleared, the quiet murmur erupted into genuine conversation, laughter, the clinking of glasses, the sound of enjoyment, not analysis. Michael and his team were stranded in the sudden stillness of the kitchen, surrounded by the wreckage of their effort, dirty pans, scattered ingredients, the steam and heat of battle. They were too exhausted to process what the noise from the other room meant. Then Evelyn Sterling walked in. She didn't go to Michael first. She went to Sophia, to Marco, to Greta, thanking each by name. Finally, she approached the pass. "Well, Chef Vale," she said, and the use of the title was deliberate. "I believe you have successfully repurposed the narrative." The feedback was not just positive, it was effusive. The investors, initially worried about a fluff piece, were now excited about a unique brand differentiator. The blogger who had written the hit piece was cornered by 3 guests raving about the food. He would publish a follow-up the next morning titled, "Sterling Tech's Secret Ingredient, Humility." Martin Thorne, ever the pragmatist, shook Michael's hand with a newfound, if slightly grudging, respect. "The biometric feedback idea," he conceded, "can be phased too." But the true verdict came 2 weeks later. Catherine Vance's magazine published a cover story on the restaurant, now officially named The Ida Table. The headline read, "The Algorithm of Heart, How a Cafeteria Worker's Memory Built the City's Most Anticipated Restaurant." The article detailed Michael's journey, the clash of corporate and culinary cultures, and positioned the restaurant not as a tech gimmick, but as a human-centric revolution. Reservations for the planned opening, 6 months away, sold out within 24 hours. Michael's consultancy was made permanent. He was officially named executive chef. The salary and equity transformed his life overnight. He moved with Chloe to a sun-filled apartment with a balcony and a proper kitchen. He enrolled in a business management course, not because he had to, but because he wanted to understand the world he was now navigating. The personal payoff was quieter but deeper. One Saturday, he brought Chloe to the still-under-construction restaurant. He showed her where the open kitchen would be, where guests would sit. She was most impressed by the walk-in cooler. Then, in the empty dining room, she looked up at him, her hand in his. "Do you like coming to work now, Daddy?" He knelt down to her level. "I love it, and you know what? I think I'm good at it." "I know you are," she said, with the absolute faith of a child. "Can we have the soup for dinner, the special one?" That night in their new kitchen, he made Ida's Get Well soup, the original version, from the pot. As they ate at their new table, Chloe said, "The lady who cried because of the soup, is she happy now?" "I think so," Michael said. "Good," Chloe declared. Then everything worked out. But the final, surprising twist came from an envelope that arrived at Michael's new office. It was from the Culinary Institute of America. Inside was a letter from the office of the president. It congratulated him on his success and the positive attention his story had brought to the culinary profession. Then it made an extraordinary offer, an honorary degree, and an invitation to join the board of a new initiative for continuing education, aimed at supporting aspiring chefs who had taken non-traditional paths or faced significant life obstacles. The letter cited his journey as the exact reason the program was needed. Michael sat holding the letter, the institutional logo a stark contrast to the memory of his teenage rejection letter. He hadn't just gotten a second chance at his dream. He was now being asked to help build the door for others who, like him, had been standing outside. He accepted. His first act was to endow a scholarship in his grandmother Ida's name for students who demonstrated exceptional talent but faced familial or financial hardship. The official opening night of the Ida Table arrived. The room was full of light and laughter. Elena Sterling sat at the best table, beaming. Evelyn worked the room, the proud creator. Michael's brother and Chloe sat together, Chloe wearing a pretty dress and a look of immense seriousness. In the kitchen, Michael's team moved with the smooth, confident rhythm of a crew that had earned its stripes. He no longer felt like an imposter. He was just the chef. At the end of service, Arnaud clapped him on the shoulder. "You see, the poetry first. Now you have the grammar. The book is yours to write." Michael walked out of the kitchen for a moment, wiping his hands on a towel, and stood in the shadowed doorway, watching the room. He saw people leaning in to talk, gesturing at their plates, smiling. He saw his daughter, now asleep with her head on his brother's shoulder. He saw the CEO nodding at something his mother said. He had built this, not alone, but as the heart of it. The road from the steam table to this spotlight had been paved with fear, ridicule, and impossible pressure. But it had also been paved with a grandmother's recipe, a child's clarity, a CEO's calculated gamble, and the collective belief of fellow outsiders. He had gone from being the man who cooked one meal to the man who built a table where memory was served and futures were changed. And as he looked out at the warm, humming room, he understood that the most innovative technology in the building wasn't in the servers or the smart appliances. It was, and always had been, the alchemy of care transformed into flavor and the courage to finally taste it. So what do we make of a story that begins with a bowl of soup and ends with a changed life? On one level, it's a fairy tale, a modern Cinderella story with a steam table and a stockpot. But to dismiss it as mere sentiment is to miss the harder, more interesting truth it reveals about how we value talent and how we define merit. Michael Vale's journey exposes a quiet failure in our systems. We have pipelines for the obvious prodigies, the straight-A students, the pedigreed candidates, but we have no radar for the quiet genius of the person who shows up, day after day, doing necessary work with excellence that goes unseen, because it's not on the right stage. His talent didn't appear the moment Evelyn Sterling tasted the soup. It had been there for a decade, simmering in diners and corporate kitchens, visible to anyone who cared to look. Leo, his manager, saw it, but without a catalyst, without the chance collision of his cooking with a powerful person's emotional memory, it would have remained a footnote in a cafeteria logbook. This story, then, is less about a magical break and more about the architecture of opportunity. Evelyn Sterling didn't just give a man a job, she redesigned the risk. She built a bridge with guardrails, the retainer, the mentor, the safety net, that allowed potential to cross from the world of necessity to the world of possibility. She understood that true innovation isn't just about creating new things, but about recognizing old value in new places. And what of the grandmother's recipe, the emotional core? Neuroscience tells us that taste and smell are direct pathways to memory, bypassing rational thought and tapping straight into the reservoir of who we are. That bowl of soup wasn't just food, it was a key that unlocked a 70-year-old door. In a culture obsessed with the new and the next, it was a powerful reminder that the most profound connections are often built from the oldest, most familiar materials. The future Evelyn Sterling wanted to build was anchored in the past Michael Vale carried. The lingering question is whether Michael deserved his chance. He proved that he did. The question is, how many Michaels are out there right now? The single parent coding brilliantly in their spare time but stuck in a tech support role. The retiree with a revolutionary idea but no access to venture capital. The immigrant with a degree that isn't recognized, their skills languishing in a job that requires only a fraction of their mind. They are in every office, every factory, every town. Their potential isn't missing. Our ability to see it, and more importantly, to structure a way for it to safely emerge, often is. Michael's story didn't end with a restaurant opening. It continues in the scholarship he founded, in the team of outsiders he now leads, in the example he sets for his daughter. The circle of a single act of care expanded from a sick woman's memory to a man's reclaimed dream to a table where others are now fed, in every sense of the word. It's a reminder that sometimes the most disruptive technology isn't a piece of software or a new device. It's a shift in perspective. It's looking past the resume to the story. It's valuing the wisdom of a grandmother's recipe alongside a business plan. It's having the courage, whether you're the CEO or the cook, to believe that a different outcome is possible and then building the ramp to get there. The world is full of unseen potential, waiting for its moment to be tasted. Sometimes, all it takes is one person to stop and look and ask the right question. And sometimes, the answer changes everything. If you found this story of hidden potential and second chances compelling, make sure to subscribe for more documentaries on the unseen forces that shape our world. Thanks for watching.